Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolon Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
1/3 of all murder cases in America remain open.
He had told me that if I opened my eyes, he would slit my throat.
Each one is called a cold case.
The DNA evidence taken from the victim was a match. The Linden rapist was at it again.
Based on the hit A&E television program.
A phone call is placed, one that changes a family's life forever.
Cold Case Files, the podcast.
You could see the fire in his eyes. He screamed at me, "You want it? Get your tape recorder out."
Get new episodes of Cold Case Files every Tuesday on Podcast One, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you listen to podcasts.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, we talk cars, cell phones, and phone booths. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my brave co-host, Alice.
Hi, Brett. I don't know how brave I am.
Brave.
I'm bravely sitting in a closet during a storm. We have that going on. These thunderstorms are pretty crazy going on right now.
Yeah, we pretty much have one every day. We've lost at least one day of recording to it. I've lost power twice this summer.
Twice in like a week, I think.
Yeah. The first time lasted for 24 hours. The second time was like, only a couple hours, so that was fine. But I'm used to it. I can rough it, Alice. I don't need technology. I
believe you can rough it, but it is tough not to have air conditioning in this weather because it's literally over 100 degrees.
I don't know how people did it back in the day. I don't know how they lived down here without air conditioning. But
they probably didn't.
Well, things are getting hot in our case, Alice.
Indeed.
See what I did there? That
was really good.
This is episode 11, and we said we'd do it in 14, so we've only got 4 to go, including this one. I think we're going to make it.
I'm feeling the heat.
You
see what I did there?
I see what you did there. But it's okay. It's okay. We got a lot to talk about, a lot of really interesting things. We're going through sort of the controversies in this case. We've talked about livor mortis. We've talked about tapping on the desk. Now we're going to touch on cell phone stuff. We're actually going to do another episode on that. But we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about Hae-Min Lee's car, which is a big sore subject for a lot of people, and some other things of interest. We have a lot of sort of different little things we're going to talk about. We will start with cell phones. And unfortunately, I think I'm the one who has to start, so I have to say this gentleman's name. Werwanowitz, who was a cell phone expert, who worked for AT&T as a network engineer. If you've read the trial, it's a pretty intriguing part of the trial, not only because of the technology itself and what we're going to learn, but because it was so new. And because it was so new, there was actually a pretty extensive voir dire on whether or not Woronowicz was really an expert, whether or not this was the kind of thing you could have expertise in. We really need to do a legal briefs on this subject of expertise and the Daubert
Wow.
standard. Sorry.
Getting all fancy on me here.
Sorry. There is a senator from Louisiana who doesn't know how to speak English who calls it the Daubert standard, and I got stuck on that. It's actually the Daubert standard, and the Daubert standard, which is all about whether or not something is actually real science or not, whether it's the kind of thing you can have experts testify on. And so if you read it, it's pretty interesting because Gutierrez is really going after this, and there are times where it actually feels like she might get him excluded. And eventually he gets qualified as an expert, but the judge keeps it pretty narrow, basically makes him an expert on the subject of AT&T wireless equipment made by Ericsson, and that's what he can talk about. And so there's some objections when he kind of veers off subject as they discuss this. And this expert, he basically presents cell phone evidence with the towers and ABC sectors that we've talked about, and he has these color-coded maps that he's using. And look, it's effective testimony. I think everybody agrees about that. In addition to sort of general testimony about this, he also does a drive test, which is very common with cell phone expertise, where basically he drives around the neighborhood with a test phone, and he uses that to see what towers are pinged for certain calls. This is important because when you look at a flat map and you look at these cell towers, it may seem like cell towers cover a certain area, but topography can have an effect as well. If you have hills or valleys or trees and all this other stuff, it can throw things off. So what he does is he's driving to the areas that the pings appear to show, and he's basically making calls to see what is he actually pinging or not. And he uses this to verify a lot of the stuff that we've already gone through. Now, one thing that he doesn't do, unfortunately, is he's making calls the whole time. He's not doing a drive test where he's taking incoming calls. And as we've said, that's going to be a little controversial. Now, he testifies at the time, there's no difference. The records are going to be just as good whether it's an outgoing call or an incoming call. That's the way it is for a while. People criticize Cristina Gutierrez for not going after him on this because of some AT&T data sheets that we're going to talk about here in a second. But what's interesting is no one really goes after this. On direct appeal, it isn't brought up. On the initial 2254s, the sort of state habeas and then later federal habeas, they don't talk about this. No one really goes after this, not really until Serial. Serial noticed this. They were one of the first ones to notice it. Undisclosed really went into it hard, and it ended up being the basis for some challenges that Adnan would later bring on appeals, though basically the court said, you didn't bring it soon enough, you kind of waived it, this was all available at the time, and so it really kind of died off. But that hasn't kept people from questioning whether or not these incoming calls, specifically the incoming calls, are useful for data location. And they do this, the reason for these questions is because the AT&T data sheets that they have say that incoming calls could not be used for location monitoring. Now, we're going to talk more about this later, but Woronowicz will say that if he had seen that, he didn't even notice that, and maybe he wasn't even shown it, depending on who you ask. But either way, he would say if he had seen that, it could have changed his testimony. Now, the word here is could. Specifically, he said that what he would have done if he had seen that is he would have consulted with other engineers, specifically AT&T engineers, to figure out what exactly that means and why it would be the case that incoming calls were less useful for location monitoring. And this is kind of a moment in time that's passed us by because it's hard to say now, sitting here today, why exactly the incoming calls would be less useful for location data than the outgoing calls. And if you read the defense expert in the habeas hearing, even he has some trouble sort of nailing this down. His name's Jerry Grant. And even he doesn't really, at least in my opinion, do a very good job of explaining why these incoming calls would not be reliable. And in fact, he would testify he'd never seen that warning before. And in fact, he had never seen location data challenged on that basis before. we're going to get into this more later. We're going to dedicate a lot of time to talking about calls, probably in the next episode. But it's important to note that as to the outgoing calls, it seems like everyone agrees that they are fairly accurate. They were accurate at the time. They did the drive testing with the incoming calls. So to the extent you have these incoming calls, they're going to be accurate for location, with a caveat that it's always possible another tower could be used if the technology requires it due to a large number of calls pinging one tower. We saw that with some incoming calls where there were 2 incoming calls that came in. One pinged one tower, one pinged the other tower. They both pinged in the same sector, essentially, so it would be covering the same area, but you can kind of see how the phone used a different tower in that case, probably because of too many people were using the one tower, and so it automatically routed it to another tower. And you can see that, and that is something that might affect location, though as in that circumstance, a lot of times you're just going to see different tower, but a sector that covers the same area.
Well, so that's a really great point because this was such new technology. And if Gutierrez were successful in excluding the cell phone expert as an expert, there would be a lot of information that the prosecution couldn't have relied on. And obviously the cell phone records are so helpful for kind of setting their story and also the location of where Adnan is, Adnan's cell phone, where Jay is, etc. And so this is a very important voir dire that the court does. And ultimately, you know, now many years later, we use cell phone records all the time. We still to this day sometimes have things within the records that can't be explained, but it doesn't mean you toss out all of the cell phone data location information. And I can't even really make sense of why incoming and outgoing calls would have different accuracy amounts, even looking at it. I know it's not answered in the records. It's not answered by the defense or the prosecution's experts. And I can't really even make sense of it because it's the same towers, it's the same phones, same wavelengths going out there.
Yeah, I mean, one reason cell phone towers are a good thing to attack is no one understands them. They're like magic. Cell phones are magic.
It really is. And there are so few people, even within like federal agencies, who are experts in it, right? Like you might think because cell phones are used so often and are so ubiquitous in terms of like data that we subpoena from cell phone companies or from phone companies, that there would just be experts coming out of your nose. You know, there's so many experts. Reality? There's like a handful of experts in the nation on cell phone data. And we actually run into this when we have to like trace where certain wires and where certain calls go. And someone will sit there and like explain it to me. And they're the only person in the nation who can explain it to me. And I nod and I'm like, I followed none of that. So a very, very important thing to discuss is who all did Jay tell? Because Jay told a lot of people that Adnan killed Hay and he helped bury the body. And he apparently told these people before he was even interrogated by the police. Before he was brought in by the police, he supposedly told at least Jen Pusateri, Taib Hussein, and his friend Chris. But other than Jen, none of these people testified. So when did Jen talk to Jay in relation to when she talked to the police? Because this is important, right? It's closer in time to when it happened. It matters if you're thinking that Jen and Jay are trying to get their stories straight or that they're being coached by the police. All of this matters with respect to any of those theories. So did Jen talk to Jay right after the police arrived the first time? Or did she talk to him much later? During Serial, it's reported that after the police first came to Jen, she went to Jay, who told her to tell them whatever she needed to tell them to keep Jen out of it. Jen, of course, did the opposite and told them everything. But it's also been reported that Jen was angry at Jay for being pulled into this whole thing and didn't speak to Jay again until sometime in April. But none of this really matters. Some have argued that if Jay talked to Jen immediately before she talked to the police, that undermines her story because she could just be repeating what Jay told her to say. Even if true, though, it would still be the case that Jennifer learned the story from Jay before Jay talked to the police and before he'd been indoctrinated with whatever story they were trying to push. Either way, Jen would have learned what happened from Jay, whether it was the night of the murders or the day before she spoke to the police for the first time. And I think that's really important, that Basically, everything she knows, and we said this when we talked about Jen's interview, comes from Jay. It's all hearsay from Jay.
Look, Jen is just a huge hurdle to get past. Jen, it is really hard to get around that. And you see things like, I saw one person said that a Baltimore police detective was Jen's next door neighbor. What does that mean? Did he go over to her house and tell her this story so that she could then take it to the police? You know, like the stories you have to concoct for Jen not to be a problem are pretty extreme. The fact of the matter is, you watch the HBO documentary, and this is one of the things that frustrates me about documentaries. They go to Jen and they interview her, and she's like, well, you know, I don't know anymore. I don't know if I can believe Jay and all this other stuff. And that's fine. I mean, maybe Jen doesn't believe Jay anymore. But that's not the interesting question. The interesting question is, when did Jay first tell you the story? That's the interesting question. Because if Jay told her that story on the 13th, or really any time before Jay walked into that police department for the first time, that is a huge deal, because it really knocks a hole in any conspiracy theory involving the police, because the police couldn't have done it if Jay had already told the story. If he already told the story, then the story isn't the police's. And getting past Jen is one of those things that's just really hard. And I feel like that's one reason people focus so much on Jay, because Jen is tough. And the fact that the first time she went to the police, she had a lawyer with her and her mother with her, man, I mean, what do you do with that if you're trying to disprove this? And it pushes me just more and more to think that if Adnan didn't do it, it has to be some combination of Jen and Jay. And we're getting closer and closer to theories, and we're going to talk some about this. But the fact that Jen knew so much before anybody talked to Jay is a real problem. I think if you're trying to get Jay out of it, and I'll put it that way, if you're trying to remove Jay from the equation, which I think is necessary to get Adnan out of it, then I don't know how you do that given that you have Jen. So let's talk about something that has come up a couple times. The phone booth. The eternal debate. Is there a phone booth or not at the Best Buy? You know, if you listen to Serial, Sarah Koenig, she spent a long time and a lot of effort trying to figure out whether or not there was a phone booth at Best Buy. And you remember she gets like the plans? She gets the plans for the Best Buy, and she's calling people and she's trying to figure all this out. Is there a phone there or not? Because this is important, because Jay says, Adnan called me from the phone booth. Was there a phone booth? Well, we have the benefit of something that she did not have. And we've come back to this several times. That is the defense file in this case. And because we have the defense file in this case, we have Adnan's statement. And because we have Adnan's statement, we know that there was a phone booth at the Best Buy, because Adnan told us there was a phone booth at the Best Buy. And as we all know, whatever Adnan says is true. In one of his interviews with his defense team, Adnan is laying out the problems with Jay's story. And he notes that if Jay is saying he killed Hay on the side of the Best Buy parking lot where they would have sex, that wouldn't make sense. And then he says one of the things that has to be one of the most absurd things I've ever read in any true crime case, file, anything. He says, or this is how the defense attorney writes it down: Adnan would not then walk all the way to the phone booth. In parentheses, it is a long walk, and Adnan does not like walking.
The guy who's on the track team, guys.
The guy who's on the track team.
I'm sorry. I just had to point that out.
He doesn't like
Come
walking.
on.
I mean, it's like, couldn't have killed her. Don't like walking.
Because he doesn't like walking to the phone booth.
Slam dunk. I'm surprised they didn't put him on the stand to testify to the fact.
It's the notes in parentheses that kill me.
It's great. It's great. And yeah, I don't know what to make of that. But one thing I think we know for sure is there was a phone booth there, because Adnan would have just said, rather than saying, I don't like to walk and it's a long way to walk, he would have just said, they're in a phone booth. So he's saying, I called him from the phone booth. Well, that's impossible, because it's not a phone booth. This is the thing we've been looking for, right? With this phone booth is contemporaneous evidence, and we never had it. We have it now, because Adnan has definitively told us There was a phone booth, and it was a long way away from where we used to have sex, so therefore, I wouldn't have walked to that. Jay must be lying.
And I'm really sorry, guys. I'm not making fun of the lawyer's notes because they didn't know all of this would be released. Right? Like, I take notes all the time, and I'm like writing shorthand. So I'm only saying that because, you know, I don't like making fun of other people. But man, that is pretty absurd. And you write down everything your client is saying. And I'm sure he said that. He's saying, like, they probably asked him, well, why wouldn't you have used the phone booth? I don't like walking. You put that in your notes so you know why.
Because you can imagine how this would have gone down, right? I mean, the defense attorneys, they've got Jay's statement, and they are in a position where they recognize Jay's a problem. We need to defeat this. How can we defeat it? And so they're giving it to their client. And like Alice said, they're taking notes that they don't ever think are going to be released. And their client is going to help them defeat the statement. And they're looking for inconsistencies. And a big one would have been if there had been no phone booth. I mean, that would have been a great thing to be like, he says he's up there testifying that he called him from the phone booth. He didn't do that because there wasn't a phone booth there, right? I mean, that would be great if Adnan had said that. That's not what he says. And so this is how this is going. They're going through that statement, and they're looking for inconsistencies, any kind of inconsistencies. And this is a pretty weak one in the grand scheme of things, but nevertheless, they write it down. You know, they're taking good notes. They're recording everything their client said. They write this down, and I just want to reiterate, in the future, anybody out there, if you are advocating for someone you think is not guilty and needs to be released because they're innocent, whatever you do not release the defense file. It is never going to be good for you, because there are going to be these candid moments in the defense file that read like this. So
there you have it.
There you have it. So there you go. We have now established for all time, definitively, there is a phone booth.
I remember that episode of this phone booth. It's like seared into my brain of how much effort, and all we had to do was look at Adnan's own words.
Adnan's own words.
He's like, heck yeah, there was a phone booth. Did not walk to it.
Don't want to walk to that. Hate walking.
I ain't walking. Now, please take me to track practice.
Right, they were track practice. Fine with running. This is the walking.
Cannot miss track practice, but definitely not going to walk.
Definitely not going to walk. Okay, so that brings us to the car. And this is really important, so we're going to spend a little time on it. So as we said, when we went through the timeline, and which included a lot of discussion of the investigation, we know that at least overtly, the police were looking for Hayes' car. It was a 1998 gray Nissan Sentra, and the police believed it would contain evidence of her murder. The search for the car began basically as soon as Hay disappeared, with initial reports indicating the police looked in school parking lots, hospitals, hotels, and motels, as well as the surrounding area of the school with no luck. In fact, we also know that the police initially conducted a search looking for Hayes' car around where Don Kleinditz lived, because obviously Don is the boyfriend, and because he's the boyfriend, one of the things you're going to have to do is either eliminate him as a suspect or start to hone in on him. And so they're thinking, hey, he could have done it. So they're looking around his house to see if they can find Hayes' car. They don't find it. So at this point, after Hay had disappeared and they can't find her car, they don't necessarily believe she's been murdered. Indeed, documents in the police file indicate their initial thought was that she'd traveled to California to be with other relatives, or the man that is often called her father, but in fact was sort of a stepfather figure to Hay. And this is consistent with what a lot of people in the school said, that, yeah, it was weird that she left, but we all thought maybe she'd wanted to go to California. She talked about going to California, so maybe that's what she did. As we've said, in fact, her father was still in Korea, but her mother had this serious relationship with this man, and Hay had talked about going back to California, and so that was something the police had considered. And I think at that point they thought, look, we can't find the car, we haven't found it anywhere. Maybe, in fact, she drove to California. I think that was probably something the police were thinking initially.
And so when Hayes' body was found, and this was now a murder investigation, the police canvassed the area around Leakin Park and the neighborhoods on the route from Woodlawn High looking for Hayes' car, but again, to no avail. They'd also contacted tow companies in Baltimore and asked them to canvass their lots, again, with no success. On February 20th, they put out a bulletin to all officers on the East Coast describing Hayes' vehicle with its information and requesting that no one disturb the vehicle if it was found. And Crime Stoppers actually jumped in and put out a $2,000 reward for information on the car, along with images and the license plate. Police requested helicopter and dispatched officers to canvass surrounding neighborhoods for the vehicle. Basically, this is like an all-out search for the car. They really are stopping at nothing, right? They're even requesting helicopter. I think they were denied the use of the helicopter, but they're trying everything they can, asking the entire Eastern Seaboard law enforcement to help them look for this car because now they have found a body. And they also include bolos for beat cops. Remember, beat cops are out on the roads all the time. They're out there literally going down every single street and have probably the best luck of finding a car that they can't find, just hoping that someone getting this information will stumble upon Hayes' car. But all of these law enforcement efforts, all of these beat cops on the lookout, all of these bolos be on the lookouts, the helicopter requests, all of these law enforcement, I can't emphasize enough how many cops were at least notified to keep their eyes open for this car. They did not find her car. In fact, they did not find the car until Jay Wilds led them to the car. And the car was eventually found at what's been called the Edgewood Lot. The location is not far from the place Hay was buried, but it is not a place that people would ordinarily drive by, including the police, which makes sense that despite all these bolos and despite all of these requests for these beat cops who are going down every street to look out for Hayes' car, none of them saw it because it was parked somewhere that people don't typically drive past. It was parked in an alleyway with 4 entry points generally used by only the residents of that area. So this presents a great difficulty for anyone who believes Jay is making up the whole story from whole cloth. All of these officers searched for weeks on end for this car and could not find it. If Jay knew where the car was, then he must be telling at least some of the truth, right? There are some who believe that the police found Hayes' car at some point after her disappearance but did nothing, preferring instead to hold on to this information to use later to bolster a witness's testimony regarding who committed the murder. If the witness knew where the car was, the theory or conspiracy is that their testimony would be more believable.
And if you ask somebody, one of the tap people, how Jay knew where the car was, they will tell you the police told him. In fact, I've had exactly that conversation with somebody. How did the police know? Because, look, we're looking into this case. We're trying to approach this with an unbiased manner, but I need you to explain these things to me. I need to know, what is the answer to these difficult questions? Because if you have a good one, I want to know. And the police told him is sort of the standard action.
And that's a great point. Not only was this a ton of police resources, it's a ton of eyes out there that could potentially ruin your conspiracy. We've said this before in a previous episode, but these bolos are not just going out to their police department. It's going out to basically the entire East Coast. And you'd have to believe, again, that every single police department on the East Coast is in on this. Guys, if you find the car, don't say anything. The beat cop who's the lowest on the totem pole, who is not in the top sheriff or whoever, the captain's meetings, the guy who is fresh out of police academy, 21, 22 years old, carrying a gun for the first time and doing traffic stops. He sees the car and he somehow knows that he's in on this big conspiracy. Don't say anything about this car because we have to keep it as holdback evidence to bolster a fake testimony in order to frame someone else for murder. I mean, that is not an exaggeration of what you'd have to believe here. You have to explain how that's not the case because none of these bolos were fake. Right? They didn't write a bolo and then never send it out. They didn't request helicopter and never actually send the request. None of this was pretend. All of these requests were real things that happened and they take real resources. And we've seen these bolos go out. They really do reach all of the law enforcement and everyone is on the lookout for, whatever the bolo is. And that is just a massive amount of people to involve if you're trying to do something that is secretive.
Yeah, if the police had never done this, if they hadn't put out any bolos, if they hadn't requested helicopters, if they hadn't asked the entire Eastern Seaboard to look for this car, if they hadn't sent out officers to look for it, then I think you start thinking, that's weird. It's weird that they didn't look for this. This is so important. But they did do that. And as Alice said, that's a problem because somebody might find it. And that would be an issue if they do. There's a couple ways people go with this. I mean, one of them is that, well, maybe Jay just sort of was walking along and happened to see the car and then knew where it was. I mean, come on. That didn't happen. Number one, he barely knew Hay. He sat next to her in biology. There's no reason to think he would recognize her car if he saw it. And number two, the car is in a secluded area. It's basically, if you can imagine a bunch of apartment buildings surrounding a lot, it's in that lot. So if you're walking down the street, you wouldn't see it. As Alice said, one of the reasons no beat cop ran upon it. So that kind of falls away, and that leads people to say, well, maybe the car was kept somewhere else. And then it was moved to the place it was found, and presumably this was done to match the pings. But there's a big problem with this. That movement would have had to have happened before Jay Wilds told his story the first time. The police would have had to have known where the car was, that it matched the ping that covered this area the night of the murder. The one you may recall, there was a ping that covered this area, and then there was a ping just to the west of it. These are both calls to Jennifer Pusateri. The second one as they are heading towards the mall where Jennifer is going to pick up Jay. You would have to know that when you put the car there, because if you put the car in the wrong place, if you put the car in a place where the ping hadn't happened, where there was no ping, well, then you got to explain that somehow. So you need this to match, which means you have to have an understanding of the ping. But the police pretty clearly did not have an understanding of the ping the first time they talked to Jay. Remember, they're still requesting this information from AT&T. Information they already have, but they're requesting it again because they have such a lack of understanding. This is also new evidence. It's new information. They've never really used cell phones before. It's going to take some time to digest this. But you have to believe they had a sophisticated enough understanding of this ping evidence the first time they talked to Jay that they could plop the car down near where the right tower would be. Not just the right tower, but in the right sector for Jay to then take them to the right place to find it. But, oh, by the way, even though they did that with the car the first time, they waited till the next time to tap on the table to make sure that his story was correct using the cell phone evidence that they now had. They forgot to do that the first time. The only thing they did was they plopped that car down and in just the right place so that Jay could lead them to it and it would match the cell phone ping. And, of course, the evidence the car was ever moved is scant at best. There's a couple things people have pointed to. One is that someone ran the car's license plate a few weeks before it was found. But one thing that happened is when this documentary came out that HBO did, there were a couple really sophisticated private investigators who were hired to look into a lot of the different claims that were made in this case. These are guys who work with the Innocence Project, a lot of different people, and they dug into this, and they were actually able to show that. And remember, these are defense investigators. These are people who are on the side of Adnan. They investigated this, and they were actually able to show that this was actually just someone checking to see whether the car had come up anywhere, which is standard procedure. You're running the car to see whether or not it pings. For instance, maybe you run the car and somebody's towed it somewhere because they don't realize what they have. And so you're putting that information in and you're looking for it. That is what was happening here. This wasn't somebody who found the car in the lot, ran it, realized, oh my goodness, it's Heyman Lee's car. Now let's keep it here, not look at it, not go into it, because eventually maybe we can use this to bolster a witness who can frame someone for us. They were able to rule that out. There have also been efforts to demonstrate that the grass beneath the car should have been dead when in fact it was green. And this claim is based on a single photograph of the car next to another car that shows some green grass under Hayes' trunk, while the grass under the other car is brown. Problem is, it's not clear how long the other car had been there, what kind of grass we're talking about, whether the angle of sunlight could account for the green grass, and whether the rest of the grass was green. But despite the fact that, to me, and I hate to show my bias here, I think this is really ridiculous that we're even looking at this. The HBO documentary attempted to do something with this, to show that this is somehow problematic, and they came up with inconclusive results. There was nothing about the grass that was definitive.
The grass that they were testing decades later, too.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy, comfy. I'm cozy, cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. Blisters. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and T-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. greenlight.com/Wondery.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
If you're a parent or share a fridge with someone, Instacart is about to make grocery shopping so much easier. Because with family carts, you can share a cart with your partner and each add the items you want. Since between the two of you, odds are you'll both remember everything you need. And this way, you'll never have to eat milkless cereal again. So minimize the stress of the weekly shop with family carts. Download the Instacart app and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees apply. For 3 orders in 14 days, excludes restaurants.
Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's join, MOCHI.com with promo code AUDIO40.
And look, I mean, I get it. There is an effort here to build some sort of scientific evidence that you can use to bolster this idea that the police somehow were involved in this. They moved the car, maybe Jay moved the car. I don't know why Jay would move the car, but that it was stored somewhere and brought out for reasons that aren't entirely clear. But those efforts to this point have fallen through. But put that aside. It is difficult to overstate how unlikely this theory is. As we said, the police were looking for Hayes' car from the beginning, and they did not limit the search to a few key personnel. They broadcast it far and wide. Any number of civilians or beat cops could have been the ones to discover the car, and that is a lot of faith to put in those people to keep this secret.
Yeah, I won't harp on that anymore. I just... It's just a very difficult conspiracy to make sense of based on all of the steps the police took in order to look for the car. And the fact that Jay can lead them directly to it after his first statement, that's just a huge hurdle you'd have to get over in somehow saying that Jay was just coached by the police there. But let's talk about the car some more, because importantly, the car was a gold mine of possible information. Every day it was in the elements was another day it could be lost or the evidence compromised, which is why the police were trying so hard to find it quickly. The police would have wanted access to this car as soon as possible from an evidentiary standpoint. It's far better than helping bolster a witness's testimony would be DNA or other physical evidence in the car of the killer or the car of where, that Hay was driving before she died. Furthermore, if the car was used to bolster other statements before the car was processed, there was a real danger that the evidence recovered from the examination of the car would actually contradict the witness's statement, thus undermining the entirety of the state's case, because you don't know what you don't know in the car. So along with the cell phone pings that Brett was talking about earlier, you'd have to leave this car unprocessed, hidden in this alleyway, not knowing what type of DNA or trace evidence is in there that could potentially contradict whatever testimony you're trying to bolster. That is risky. And perhaps more importantly, why? Why would the police want to do that? If the cops found the car, seized it, and took it back to the lab, processed it fully, and just don't tell anyone that they found it. They don't have to. You can still make the person take you to where the car was located, even if the police had already found it. And if you want to frame someone, you can share that evidence ahead of time. You don't have to leave the car with all of its evidence sitting there just to somehow frame someone. Take it out of there. Process it. Don't tell anybody. It's an ongoing investigation. The police do that all the time. They don't talk about ongoing investigations, so nobody has to know that the police found the car. And then just tell the person you want to know where the car is, where it is, and they'll take you to where it is and say, I promise, police, the car was here the last time I saw it. And the police say whatever they want to say when in fact they have the car. They could easily do that instead of taking the very risky and foolish step of keeping the car out there, losing all that potential evidence, and somehow they could execute the same conspiracy. In other words, why would they take the lesser of the two routes?
And look, I get it that, police who are framing somebody aren't perfect, and so maybe they don't think of everything. But if you're going to frame somebody with the car, and you've already decided to do that, and you're going to frame Adnan, and you got the car and you know where it is, and you're just waiting for the right witness to come along so you can say, take us to the car, why not leave something in there? Throw Adnan's sock in there or something, put some evidence in the car that definitively shows it's Adnan. If we're doing this big time frame job anyway, where we're hiding the car and leading Jay to the car and all this other stuff, why didn't we put more evidence in the car? Why wasn't there more evidence in the car that was Adnan? It seems kind of weird that you'd put all this effort into it if you're the police, have access to the car the whole time, and not put something definitive in there. So that
frame
you could
him with actual DNA instead of this liar who has inconsistent statements left and right, has a criminal record, is 19 years old, and even says he's not that good friends with Adnan. If you're going to frame somebody, do it better, police.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that you would frame somebody using this guy. Of all people, right? I mean, it's wild that's how you would do this. He is not a credible person. Of the people you want to believe Adnan over Jay, right? And right.
It would make sense to use Adnan to frame Jay, because Jay is frameable. He has a criminal record. He's not friends with the police. He himself calls himself the criminal element of Woodlawn.
I mean, given the fact that Jay puts himself everywhere that everything happens, it would be really easy to frame Jay if you're the cops. It wouldn't be hard at all, particularly if you have the car. I mean, remember, if you have the car, we're working on the premise that the police have the car and they're just looking to frame somebody because they want to clear this murder. Remember, that's the theory for why they're framing somebody. It's not that Don was good friends with the mayor or something, and so they got to frame somebody else. The sole reason for this is we got a murder, we should clear this, right? I mean, that's the theory. So if you're just looking to frame somebody to clear the case, frame Don, people. Like, just put something of Don's in the car and then find the car and be like, well, we found something of Don's. And then Adnan can say, well, that's crazy because I gave him my cell phone. Well, look at the cell phone pings. They're just everywhere they need to be. And who had this cell phone? Don had it. You could do that. It would be the easiest thing in the world. Like, it's mind-blowing that the police would choose.
It's a really bad
this.
frame job. It's just a
Terrible.
really bad frame job of all the things to frame, because eventually Hayes' car would be found, right? Like it would be found, and just to be leaving it out there, like, it's not like it was at the bottom of the ocean, right? It's not like they had to drain some pond or drain some lake and get her car up. It's literally sitting out there for anyone to see. And yes, it was like a residential area, but eyes were on it at all times. They just didn't know what they were looking at. That's so risky. That's not how you carry out a conspiracy. So many risky elements could go the wrong way for this frame job to go wrong.
And I keep saying Don, and I mean Jay. But you could frame Don, too, if you wanted to. I mean, Don's the current boyfriend. Like, if you've got the car, you can frame anybody you want. You can take the evidence you have and use it to frame somebody. If Jay's the most obvious one because he has the cell phone the whole time, right? So he's easy. It's just easy to frame Jay.
The pings follow him, right?
His pings are following him. He's everywhere he needs in Lincoln Park.
He's just a less savory character if you're just looking at it on paper, right? Adnan is like on the track team, on the honor roll, or in honor classes or whatever. And like Jay is buying weed or selling weed, you know, like, just based on paper, which one are you going to frame? Probably Jay. He seems much more believable to frame than Adnan.
Jay would be so easy to frame. And then what do you have? You know, you have Jay and his best friend, Jen. That's all you got. You know, Jen's going to testify for him, and the prosecution just tears her apart. Oh, you're best friends with him. Oh, y'all were probably in a relationship, weren't you? Oh, y'all talked all the time? You know, I mean, they would basically do what Cristina Gutierrez tried to do, tie them together. And then you've got, the drug dealer, the guy with a record. You know, he was probably jealous of Hay, or he wanted Hay, and she rejected him. It was so easy to form.
It was a drug deal gone wrong.
Deal gone wrong.
You know, he was selling weed, and she, you know, didn't want to pay him what she owed him or whatever. I mean, there's so many things that they could have done, and it probably would have been somewhat believable.
And just the whole point of this rant that we're on is, if they had the car, what a stupid thing to do. Not because, once again, these are obviously police who don't have scruples, right? It's not like, if you believe they have the car, they're hiding the car, and they're using it to frame somebody, they're clearly willing to engage in a pretty thoroughgoing frame job. They could have made it so much more convincing if they.
Right.
If
the
that
whole
was
point
what
of
they
this is like, it is not conceivable that they knew where the car was, and they just let it there, and they led Jay to lead the police there. It just doesn't make any sense, because that just implicates kind of this massive frame job by the police. And then if they were going to do that, it's just a really bad frame job.
Not to mention, I mean, I get it. There are police officers who plant evidence. There are police officers who lie. It's not as common as people act like it is, but it does happen. But if it happened in this case, you have to believe that a whole lot of police officers are risking everything to convict Adnan Syed of this case. You have to believe that.
And again, yes, this now has become like the case of true crime. Back then, this is an 18-year-old guy who no one's ever heard of. He doesn't have like ties to important people, to the governor, to senators, or whatever. It's honestly, as sad as this is, another murder, right? There's nothing fantastic about it. In fact, there are other cases going on at this very time in the city that are getting more press time. This is interesting at Woodlawn High School because one of their own has been murdered and one of their own is being accused of murdering Hay. But this is not like the case of the century that it has now become. So why would they, of all of the things they could do, they have so many this is Baltimore. They have so many crimes that they have to prosecute and investigate, so many murders that they have to clear. Why this one, an 18-year-old kid who has no criminal history? Why is it him that they are going to focus all of their energies and all of their conspiracy energy on in order to convict him?
And there are people who say things like, well, but, you know, she was a really good student and all this other stuff. And I'm sorry, and don't take this the wrong way, but she was also an immigrant. She was Korean. She was South Korean. She was not the kind of person who was going to get huge press coverage that was going to put that much pressure on the police to solve this case that they would go all out with the most massive frame job ever to make it happen.
And we've seen this. We see this today. You know, certainly was the case 20 years ago. I can tell you because I grew up at the same time, right? Like, if you're blonde and cute, blue-eyed girl, you'd get a lot of press time. Everyone else, we know this to be the case. It's just kind of bias, right? It happens. Do not get as much media playtime. She does not fit the mold of the John Bonet type or, you know, some other cute blonde girl who gets murdered. She was an immigrant, like you said, you know, she mattered. Absolutely, she mattered. But this was not the case that gripped the nation at the time. It has now become that. But remember where we were 20 years ago, basically, is that without more, and by more, I mean any evidence whatsoever that the police knew where Hayes' car was located, and there is no evidence. Point me to the evidence that the police knew where the car was. The idea that the police knew where Hayes' car was before talking to Jay is not only highly unlikely, it's frankly laughable.
It is laughable. And I get that it's important if you want to go a certain way with this case, but I'm going to need more than just the assertion that the police told Jay where the car was to believe that. I'm going to need something, anything. and I'm not getting it. Let's bring this forward 20 years or so to another thing that's controversial. We're going to put this online on the website for this episode and look at it because we're going to describe it. I'm a little concerned that our ability to describe it may not be great, so look at it. And this is the prosecutor's note that became important in the recent motion to vacate the conviction of Adnan Syed. So when Adnan's conviction was overturned, one of the reasons cited was a note written by the prosecutor that Adnan's team claimed was Brady material that was never turned over. If you read any mainstream coverage of this case, it will say that Adnan Syed's conviction was overturned because of Brady material that was not turned over. And this material was said to point to another suspect. Now, we have discussed how this is a pretty weak Brady claim on our other podcast, Legal Briefs. But what about the note itself? What does it show? So the note is written on a piece of yellow legal pad paper. He told her that he would make her disappear. He would kill her. This is the note that has been pointed out as being the note that leads the defense to say, look, if we'd have had that, we could have pointed to an alternative suspect. And according to reporting, that alternative suspect, the he in that note, is none other than Bilal Ahmad, who we have mentioned several times over the course of these podcasts. And Bilal Ahmad, if you don't recall, is someone who was a leader in the mosque. He would later become a dentist, and he would later be convicted of sexually assaulting several boys. And he would basically, I guess he would use nitrous oxide to knock them out, and then he would sexually assault them. So he's already a criminal. He is the same person who, if he did not purchase Adnan's cell phone, he put Adnan's cell phone on his cell bill. So, does this hold water? Well, when you look at the entire note, it has a little bit different connotation than if you look at that in isolation. The entire note is actually a written notation of a call the prosecutor, Kevin Urich, took. And I'm going to read this to you. Part of it is blacked out, and so we're going to have to speculate a little bit about what is beneath the blacked out parts. But I'm going to read it to you. So it starts off, she's very scared. So this is his notes. He's on the phone with somebody, he's taking notes. She's very scared, has some legitimate fears. Prior to the murder, and this is blanked out, was upset that the woman was creating so many problems for Adnan. He told her that he would make her disappear. He would kill her. Admits, it's covered up, makes grandiose statements. Very high opinion of himself, so she did not necessarily take him seriously. Another witness, Wiles J. He was involved in burial of the body. Aware, blank, saying, blank got confidential information from Adnan's case. Blank would talk to Christine with blank and Adnan when body was found. So apparently she is with blank and Adnan when Hay's body was found. Both talked about police ability to determine time of death, asked about her, can't really read what this says, experience, rate time of death, another blank, Muslim student, blank. Okay. Like I said, take a look at the note. We're going to post it. I want you to look at it. There are two ways to read this note. One is the way the defense wants you to read it. This person, whoever this woman is, heard Bilal say he was going to kill Hay, presumably because she was making trouble for Adnan. However, reading the note again in context, it's clear that whoever this is heard information from Bilal related to the case. Note that this person was with Bilal and Adnan when the body was found. They also know that Bilal has confidential information on the case and that he talked to Christina, Adnan's attorney. If Bilal had told Hay that he was going to kill her, and it's not clear that he'd ever met Hay, this person, the woman, who many people speculate is Bilal's now ex-wife, wouldn't necessarily know that. But if he was sharing information with her he'd learned from Christina, information like Adnan had threatened to kill Hay, then it would fit. This is bolstered by the second major piece of information in the call, that Jay was, quote, another witness who had helped bury the body. Unless we think this case is much weirder than it already is, Jay wouldn't be another witness to Bilal killing Hay, and he wouldn't have helped Bilal bury the body. When Urich, who is a prosecutor, was asked about this note, he said that the he in the he told her he would make her disappear statement was Adnan. If this is true, you can see why this is basically useless evidentiarily and not worth doing anything with, including turning over to the defense. The information being given isn't firsthand. It's the information that Bilal has heard from Adnan's lawyer, which his lawyer, Christina, had in turn gotten from discovery in the case. So the prosecution is essentially hearing back from Bilal's ex-wife the information that they are responsible for generating in the first place. They would not and could not use her statement in their case, and they would be under no obligation to turn it over to the defense. In fact, they already had, and that's why Bilal got it in the first place. That's confusing? Read the note. Take a look at the note, think about it in its entirety, and see whether or not you think it is Bilal did this, or whether or not it is Bilal talking about Adnan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said that really well, Brett. The one thing that really jumps out at me that you have to reconcile with if this is talking about Bilal killing Hay is the J piece. The J piece is still very clear that Jay helped bury the body. And we haven't seen anything with respect to Jay and Bilal being connected, that their cell phone pings were together. Why would Jay help Bilal? It makes no sense whatsoever. And that is still there. Unless, again, like what Brett was saying, we get these calls all the time where people think they've learned information, but because we know the whole case file, we're like, you're just repeating information that you heard that we turned over to the defense. And that's not information we have to turn over yet again. Because we get these calls not infrequently, right? Also, it's from a lot of basically spurned lovers. We get a lot of those, like ex-girlfriends, ex-wives, or roommates of exes or whatever, who think they've heard something and they just have to tell the police what they know. And they seem to think they know more than they actually do.
And let me say one other thing about this note. One thing that is so frustrating about this is the way that the Baltimore city attorney, or whatever she's called, the way she handled this short-circuited so much that would have been helpful. This note really needed to be debated in public in a hearing, because if you'd had this follow sort of the ordinary course of business where the defense files something, they make a Brady claim, the prosecution has their opportunity to argue about this, it wouldn't be me trying to interpret this for you or you reading it trying to interpret it. It would have been people testifying about it. It would have happened in open court. There would have been a discussion about it, and probably we would have very quickly come to either this is a real thing and maybe an actual Brady violation, or it's something that doesn't mean anything at all. But because all of that was short-circuited by the haphazard way this was done, and we discussed this at length in our legal briefs episodes on this, it eliminated the ability for truth finding. And so instead, we're arguing about this on a podcast, and it's really frustrating to me that the ordinary processes that would have helped us to understand this more thoroughly and would have had people on the stand under oath talking about it were all short-circuited. And instead, we have this bare bones filing, and we're having to look at this after the judge has already made their decision.
So that's a really, really important point. But, we are trying our hardest to finish this in 14 episodes. So here we go. Let's move on to Kristi Vinson. Kristi Vinson is interviewed by police on March 9th, and she says that Jay and Adnan came to her house between 5:15 and 6 of the day that Hay went missing. Jay will later testify that it was between 5:30 and 6 p.m. She also remembered that the day they stopped by was Stephanie's birthday. She knew Jay through Jen Pusateri, who was her sorority sister. Jay and Adnan, she said, were acting very strange. And Kristi thought they might be high. She thought Adnan was definitely very high, but didn't really know about Jay. Kristi said they were acting shady. Adnan was sort of slumped over against the bed, which also doubled as a sofa, and Jay was sitting next to him. Now, Jay was not his ordinary happy-go-lucky self, and Kristi felt uncomfortable. They only stayed for 20 to 30 minutes when Adnan got a phone call on his cell phone, and Kristi remembered Adnan saying, quote, "If they come talk to me, what should I say? What should I do?" And it's widely speculated that this call was from Aisha. Shortly after the call, Adnan got up and left without saying a word. Then Jay got up and followed him without saying a word. After a few minutes, Kristi looked out her window, and Jay and Adnan were sitting in the car talking. Then they drove off. They left in such a rush that Jay actually left his hat and cigarettes at Kristi's house. Sometime after 10 p.m. that night, Jen Pusateri and Jay returned to Kristi's house, and Kristi described the encounter as odd. Jennifer seemed completely zoned out, as if she wasn't even there, and Kristi asked what was wrong, and Jay told her not to worry about it. After 30 to 45 minutes of weirdness, Jen and Jay left. And just like before, Jen and Jay don't even say anything. They just kind of get up and leave. Fast forward, after Hay was found, Jen told Kristi that someone she went to school with when she was at Woodlawn had been found in the park, and the police wanted to ask her questions about it. Jen told Kristi she didn't know why the police wanted to talk to her. After Jen's initial interview with the police, Kristi was present at Jay's job, which Kristi describes as a porn shop. When Jen told Jay that he needed to tell the police everything he knew, but Kristi didn't really know what she meant by this. She just overheard Jen telling Jay this. After they left the place where Jay worked, Kristi asked Jen, "What's going on?" And Jen told Kristi that Adnan had strangled Hay and the police were asking questions about it. Kristi said this made her really angry. She couldn't believe that Jay would bring someone like that to her house. At the time of this conversation, the manner of Hay's death was still unknown. Kristi's testimony is obviously incredibly problematic for Adnan, and those who have sought to exonerate Adnan have focused on debunking Kristi, most famously in the documentary The Case Against Adnan Syed. The producers of the show found a class schedule for Kristi showing that she had a class that semester from 6 to 9 p.m., and it was one that only had 3 sessions. Kristi's actually surprised by this, as she clearly remembered watching Judge Judy when Adnan and Jay came over, but Judge Judy comes on at 6 p.m. So there's a few possibilities here. The first is that it was just a different day, and Kristi is wrong. The second is that Kristi blew off the class, though this does seem unlikely given the compressed time schedule. The third possibility is Kristi just went to class later, which is something I know I've done before. When you have like a very, very long class, a 3-hour class, what's 30 minutes late, 45 minutes late? You still make it to class, you still get there, catch up on some notes, you'll probably catch up in context clues, but perhaps she just got there late since it was so long. She wanted to eat dinner. for example, since she knew she was going to be there all the way to 9 p.m. But the fourth possibility relates to the weather. Everyone knows from Asia McClain's testimony, a winter storm was bearing down on Baltimore. And it's possible, if not likely, that this class was either moved up to avoid people driving home in the storm late at night, or it was made up later for the very same reason of the storm brewing. It's unfortunate that this question was only raised to Kristi 20 years later, as now she understandably has no recollection of the day whatsoever, and it's impossible to know if such an ad hoc change of her class really happened. But there's also a fifth possibility. If Jay and Adnan got to Kristi's house at 5:15 and stayed 30 minutes, Kristi could have still made her class at 6 p.m. The problem with this, of course, is Judge Judy, which definitely did start at 6 p.m. Of course, it's also possible that this is the detail that is wrong. We know that Krista found out from Aisha Pittman that Hay was missing at around 5 o'clock. She learns that Hay is missing, and she knows that Adnan was supposed to get a ride from Hay. So at 5:14 p.m., Adnan gets a call that goes to voicemail, and it lasts for 1:07. Krista will testify that she called Adnan and left a message for him to call her and that Hay was missing. Immediately after that call, it appears that Adnan checks his voicemail. Because this call doesn't have location data, we actually can't know where Adnan was at the time. At 5:38 p.m., Adnan calls Krista, though this call only lasts for 2 seconds. So it's not a stretch to think that it was the call from Krista and not the call from Officer Adcock at 6:24 that set off Adnan and led him to ask, if they come talk to me, what should I say? What should I do? Adnan may have been asking this question of Jay and not the person on the phone. But the problem here is that this 2-second call pings 501 North Athol Avenue, which covers the I-70 park and ride. And the next call pings around Kristi's house, but not this one.
I think the most likely thing here is the weather.
That makes a lot of sense. Because you know that nighttime, like on the East Coast, that's when weather gets bad. Black ice happens. You can't see clearly. 9 p.m. to get out to drive is pretty dangerous.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you have Kristi who remembers them coming over, tells the police that. She remembers this very clearly.
She remembers Stephanie's birthday.
Right, yeah.
It's Stephanie's that's something that sticks in your mind.
And it was one of their sorority sisters' birthdays. There's 2 people who have birthdays that day. And she remembers those things, and she remembers those things at the time and tells the police that. And there's those cell phone pings, both of which cover her house at exactly the time when she would have been there. And she remembers watching Judge Judy while they're there, which is the 6 o'clock hour when Officer Adcock would have called. So you've sort of got these 2 pieces of information where you have all this evidence that that's what happened, and then you have this one thing, this one incongruous thing that 20 years later somebody comes up with, which is his class schedule. And when you're thinking this through, what is more likely? That she completely got that wrong, that the cell phone pings are all wrong, that everybody's wrong about this, or that there's some kink in the class schedule that led to her not being there? I'll leave that for you guys to decide. It also doesn't really matter that much because it's just, it puts Adnan and Jay together that night, but we know they're together that night. We know from Adnan's own statements to his defense attorneys that he was with Jay when the call from Officer Adcock came in. He says he was reaching across him to get the phone out of the glove compartment. So it's nice to have Kristi because of how weird they act. They act very weird, and they run out, and she sees them sitting down there talking about something that obviously speaks to sort of their mindset. But as far as putting them together, you don't need this to put them together. But given the cell phone pings and everything else, I think it's more likely that they were at Kristi's house just as she remembered and just as she told the police. Okay, we got one more thing to talk about, and then we are going to sign off for today. And that is DNA. We're not going to talk about this for very long because the DNA doesn't really matter. If there is one misconception about this case that should be cleared up, it's that DNA has exonerated Adnan Syed. It has not. No unidentified DNA has been found on Hayes' body. No unidentified DNA has been found on Hayes' clothes. The only unidentified DNA found was touch DNA on shoes in the back of Hayes' car, shoes that she may have worn that day and she may not have. It is difficult to overstate how insignificant this is. If the DNA were in two places, say the shoes and Hayes' blouse, that would be something. If the DNA were somebody's involved in the case, Jay, Don, Bilal, Sellers, that would be something. If the DNA hit a serial killer in the CODIS database or an unknown subject from another murder, that would be something. But all we have is some unknown touch DNA on some shoes. Or it would be more shocking if unknown DNA wasn't found. And one thing I want to point out, because people say this, is, well, if Adnan strangled her to death, his DNA should be on her. And so since it's not, he must not have done it. Hay was murdered, and she was strangled to death. And yet, despite that fact, no one's DNA is on her. Someone killed her. And whoever did it didn't leave DNA on her body. Could have been Adnan, could have been someone else. But the absence of DNA tells you absolutely nothing. And I think there's a reason that the appellate court, when it overturned Adnan's conviction, even though they didn't have to do this, took the time to drop a footnote basically pointing out that any claim that this DNA evidence exonerates Adnan Syed is completely without any basis. And it's unfortunate that that statement has spread so far and wide, and there's so many people who have been misled by it because it simply is not true.
And so often that exoneration, that term with DNA is just like a mismatch of terms, right? DNA doesn't exonerate you. It just points to you or it doesn't, because it can't rule you out. It's a percentage of the likelihood that this DNA matches someone else. And that's such a great point, Brett. We know that Hay was murdered and Hay was strangled, but no one's DNA shows up. What we do know is that you can be aware that DNA is something that exists, and we have, at least in conversation, Adnan talking about DNA, right? Talking about being scratched by her during a struggle. This is, of course, from Jay's testimony. So he could have been lying, absolutely. But people knew about DNA 20 years ago, and they knew that it was something that you could leave behind. And there's a reason that DNA is not the end-all be-all, because if you're good, you don't leave behind DNA. If your car is in the elements, if your body's in the elements, DNA gets destroyed as well. And the only place to have unidentified DNA being your shoes, think about all the places your shoes are. There's a reason, and I know Brett makes fun of me for this, that I don't let people wear shoes into my house because shoes are disgusting. But truly, shoes touch everything. And like you said, Brett, if there was not some unknown, unidentified DNA on her shoes, that actually would be a little bit weird, because your shoes touch the most number of surfaces of all of your clothing, you could say.
Yeah. I mean, that would have raised red flags to me about the testing that was done. And people have asked why this stuff it took so long to test. We've talked about this before. DNA testing technology is always improving. And I think the simple answer is there wasn't enough DNA to even test before recently. Now we have the capability of testing very small amounts of touch DNA. That's what you have here. But you have to be smart about this, and you have to think about this in context. You know, let's say Adnan was retried tomorrow. Is this something the defense would bring up? Sure. You could bring that up. You could point out that there was touch DNA on the shoes, and that would be something the jury would consider. Is it something that would sway the jury at all? I seriously doubt it. It is so insignificant that it's barely even evidence at all.
And that's a great point, right? The defense can go so far as to say, there's no DNA that ties, Adnan to the scene. Okay? But they can't say the DNA exonerates him. They can't they can say that. It's just not supported by the evidence. And so if you are hearing someone say, oh, he's been exonerated by DNA evidence, that is not an accurate statement whatsoever.
And as, people point out, according to Jay at least, Adnan was wearing gloves. And that would have also had some effect on how much DNA is going to be left behind. All right. Well, we are nearing the end, guys.
We're kind of on track.
We are kind of on track. We are going to have a discussion of the cell phone evidence in this case. And then I think we're going to get into theories. Kind of sad that we're coming to the end, Alice. I've really enjoyed talking about this case with you. I don't know.
Whew,
maybe we should add a few more 1,000 words in here and see if we can just keep this going.
We could always do an addendum, but maybe not tonight.
Yeah, maybe not tonight. Well, do you want to answer a question? Do we want to do one question before we sign off?
I don't know where things stand with baby Brittany. I might have to go check to see if I've abandoned my child at this point.
Well, okay. Well, this time we're going to skip questions for tonight, but we got plenty, and there's plenty of episodes to go. So there will be questions in the future. Leave your 5-star reviews. Leave your questions. We will answer them. Okay, hit us up, prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all your social media. Hello to those of you watching this live and ad-free. Actually, before it's even live and ad-free, watching it literally live. Those of you on Patreon, thank you so much for supporting us. And if you couldn't make it tonight, you're listening to it ad-free, early and ad-free later on. So thank you so much. You guys are awesome, and we love you. But the truth is, we love all of our listeners equally. Patrons a little bit more than others, but, you know.
I love them all
listeners
equally.
are equal. Some are more equal than others. Okay, Alice, is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, but man, I think we got worked up today. But you know, we're gonna get there. And thank you guys for joining us for this ride. This is really fun, and there's still actually a good bit to talk about.
And this is Alice and I have been recording for 3 hours, so anything we got wrong, blame it on that. But all right, guys, we'll be back next week. But until then, I'm Brett,
and I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. And I assume your input is still focused, right?
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, it is.
All right. I don't know what we're talking about now. What are we talking about now?
Okay, let me go back. Waranowitz. I don't know why I cannot say that word. That name. Waranowitz. Oh my goodness, Alice. Waranowitz. It's the "w" that really gets me.
I think we'll get to her car, so we'll talk about her car.
Okay.
I'll mention the car.
I'm trying to upload these before I forget. Oh, wait, no, I don't need that. I don't have much else to say about that.
Well, I'm glad I was just so brilliant. That's so brilliant.
Well, no, I mean, I think this is very important here. I'm still just stuck on you saying Dobear.
Dobear! The Dobear standard! No gumbo!
That was so bad. Oh my, I'm so sorry. I couldn't hear anything after Dobear because I was like, wow, who is this idiot?
Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences, like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code LISTEN50 for 50% off, plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code LISTEN50.
You know what makes every outfit look better? The right bra from Third Love. Their bras make it easy to ultimate cleavage, a smooth look, or even stop your shirt buttons from pulling. They make over 60 sizes, including half cups you won't find anywhere else, so you'll find your perfect fit. Third Love solves bra problems, or what they call broblems. Real women test every style they make. Comfort and support are guaranteed. So stop settling for bad bras. You deserve better. Get your problem solved today. Save $15 on your first order with code podcast15 at thirdlove.com.
See what hit blockbusters are streaming free this month during Popcorn Summer Movies on PlutoTV. Watch Django Unchained or Transformers Dark of the Moon for an action-packed evening, or The Truman Show and School of Rock for a good laugh with the whole family. Plus, Pluto TV has thousands of other free movies available on live and on demand. Download Pluto TV on all your favorite devices for free and start streaming now.